all the lights are.
Oh, that was metaphoric. Yeah, it was metaphoric, wasn't it?
No, you're absolutely right.
All right.
Hi, Rosemary. How are you, hon? That's good.
Dan, are we waiting for anybody from fireworks, or are they?
They'll be attending remotely. So we're all set.
Okay.
I don't know if I need to announce that or tell anybody that.
I think we'll be okay.
Should we try to go?
Vote on the last item that we have. No. Great. Good evening and welcome to the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. Have a roll call for attendance, please.
Here.
Here.
Callie Barr. Here. Kamika Garrett is excused. Sherry Budd.
Here.
Jeff Jar. Here. Brian Kelly.
Here. We have an agenda before us. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
A motion from Commissioner Atchison, support from Commissioner Cullen. Do you have any comments or discussion regarding the agenda? Seeing as we have none, all in favor to approve the agenda, say aye. Aye. So the agenda for this evening has been approved. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of March 23rd, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of March 23rd, 2022 as presented.
Do you have support?
Support.
A motion from Commissioner Budd, support from Commissioner Jar. Do you have any comments or discussion regarding the motion or the minutes?
Through the chair, on the minutes for March 23rd, it indicates that Atchison was present. I was excused, I was absent.
Yeah, I thought we corrected those, yeah. The wrong ones must have got it sent, because we corrected that when we did them.
Are present and excused.
Yeah,
You know, I don't know how we missed that. I'll make that correction.
Any other discussions?
I might have included the older version in the packet, my mistake. We'll correct that.
All right, wonderful. So all in favor of approval of the minutes with the correction that's been presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have approved the minutes for the March 23rd, 2022 meeting. Our first item under new business is case number 2213, Phantom Fireworks, Lakewood Shopping Center location for temporary land use. The applicant, Phantom Fireworks, is requesting a temporary land use permit to conduct temporary outdoor fireworks at a tent sale. The location of the project is 2095 Rawsonville Road, located in the Lakewood Shopping Plaza on the east side of Rawsonville and south side of I-94 Service Drive. The activity is proposed from June 22nd to July 4th, 2022. We have a presentation from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Planning Commissioners. As mentioned, this first review is for the Phantom Fireworks location at the Lakewood Shopping Center. This is another of our typical fireworks temporary land use permit applications for sale of fireworks. This is not for a fireworks event. As mentioned, this first application is for the Lakewood site located at 2095 Rawsonville Road. The duration of the proposed sales event is from June 22nd to July 4th of this year. The hours of operation for the event would be from 10 o'clock a.m. to 10 o'clock p.m. And pursuant to the zoning ordinance, as with the case we reviewed at the last meeting, any of these such events that extend beyond 7 consecutive days require Planning Commission approval. So, and that's based on section 7.120 of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. So I'll go through some findings regarding this particular site based on that section of the zoning ordinance quickly, because many of the aspects of the site and the proposal have been the same for years. So firstly, the adequacy of parking and access has been demonstrated. The site has nearly 900 parking spaces, 877 spaces, 31 of which are handicap reserved. The tent will use approximately 30 regular parking spaces, including its surroundings, and a very open parking lot. There's a lot of extra space. The existing parking lot handles drainage. The site is also compatible with its surrounding land uses, as it's a retail sales site and an existing shopping plaza. The size, height, and type of construction of the proposed buildings in relation to the surrounding site are appropriate because the tent and portable storage container are temporary in nature, and tent sales regularly take place in parking lots. The proposed sales area remains over 100 feet from the right-of-way of the South I-94 service drive and over 30 feet from adjoining outlot boundary. So the setbacks, the adequate setbacks have been met under the zoning ordinance. The power will be supplied by Phantom Fireworks. Trash and disposal will be also handled by Phantom in relation to their agreement with Showstack Brothers. They will also have to clean up their site. Showstack is the managing agent for Lakewood Shopping Center. Because this is short-term and it's in close proximity to a shopping center, there's no standalone sanitary facilities for this use. Again, the hours are 10 to 10. Outdoor light and signs, there's no new proposed exterior lights. There are some lights inside the tent that will be hung by the tent company. And the zoning ordinance permits one temporary sign, and in this case, the Phantom folks have reduced their signage over the years to be exactly the size that's required under the zoning ordinance, which is a 4x8 sign. The applicant is providing the licenses and permits required. A current consumer fireworks retail facility license must be provided by the applicant under the zoning ordinance. Potential noise, odor, dust, and glare are not concerns for this type of a temporary use, given its setback from adjacent uses. There will be 3 to 6 staff members on site during the operations, and otherwise the site will be monitored for fire safety. The site does contain the required number of extinguishers and exits inside the tent. The roads in the vicinity of the site are sized to handle the traffic flow to and from the site. With regard to performance bonds, the property owner would be responsible for ensuring the site is returned to its pre-sale condition. There are no bonds that we would typically require to secure that. That's something that the applicant has been taking care of year in and year out. The other conditions that may apply, there really are none other than just the specific rules within the state statute that enables these uses, and that's Act 256, and the applicable regulations of the fire department. This being the 10th year at this site, I'm not aware of any issues. We've never had any complaints at this site, so I just recommend conditional approval of this use. With one minor condition, there are some labels indicating Belleville on the application paperwork. I'd just like to make sure those are stated as Van Buren Township in future years. I'll also just summarize that the fire marshal in his letter dated March 24th had reviewed the application and found that the application and site plan is in compliance with Van Buren Township's adopted fire code, as well as state regulations for fireworks sales. And as customary with these uses, the fire marshal will perform a pre-event inspection at the beginning of their setup. So with no further comments, I recommend approval of this condition, of this temporary land use. And we do have Richard Tapper from Phantom Fireworks on our Zoom link if you'd like to hear from him as well.
Thank you, Director Power. If the applicant has anything you'd like to add, I'd love to hear from him.
Try to just speak loudly, Mr. Tapper, if you can.
I will be ready to stand up. Hi, can you hear me? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. Hi again, my name is Richard Tapper. I'm the state regional for Phantom Fireworks. I've been working with them for 12 seasons now, since the state has approved us to sell 1.4G fireworks in the state of Michigan. This is our 11th season at this location. The tent position and storage unit has not changed since day one, so we're in the same position. And over the last 10 seasons, we have not had any type of accidents or incidental problems at this location whatsoever.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Tapper. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Appreciate you letting me come on Zoom.
All right, that brings us up to commission discussion and comment. Does any of the commissioners have questions or comments regarding this agenda item?
Through the chair, seeing how Phantom Fireworks, Mr. Tapper, have been doing this at this location for 11 years now, and there's been no issues, no incidents, nothing of any danger has been reported. I don't have an issue with this land use, temporary land use.
Wonderful. Any other commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to say to Mr. Tapper that with this application, I notice that there's a very nice layout showing where all 3 fire extinguishers are. This year, I don't have to ask. I see it in the packet, and thank you very much.
Do you have any other comments? Are we ready to have a motion on this item?
Through the chair, I move that we grant Phantom Fireworks temporary land use permit at the site located at 2095 Rawsonville Road, also known as Lakewood Shopping Plaza parking lot. I would like to notate for the record the staff report of the analysis and findings that has been drafted by Dan Power and dated April 8th, 2022. I'd also like to reference the Van Buren Township Fire Marshal, I believe he is, Andrew Canahan, also dated March 24th, 2022. I'd like to add for the record that the application has one reference, that it shall reference Van Buren Township municipality and not Belleville.
Thank you. Do we have support for the motion? We have a motion by Commissioner Atchison, support by Commissioner Barr. Any comments or discussion regarding this motion? Seeing as we have none, a roll call vote, please.
Bud,
Yes.
Callie Barr,
Yes.
Medina Atchison, Brian Cullen,
Yes.
Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Brian Kelly.
Yes. And the motion passes. Thank you so much, Mr. Tapper. The motion has been approved for temporary land use. That brings us to agenda item number 2 under new business, case number 2217, Phantom Fireworks, the Menard site for temporary land use request. Phantom Fireworks is requesting a temporary land use permit to conduct temporary outdoor fireworks tent sales at 10010 Belleville Road, located in the Menards parking lot. First item up is a presentation by township staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Different site, very similar format. So this site, again, is at 10010 Belleville Road. This proposed use is proposed to go from June 22nd to July 4th, also from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'll go through the findings briefly. This site, like the others that we've reviewed, has a very expansive parking lot. This one used a little bit more than the Lakewood site, I would imagine, but still ample parking capacity to serve this use. There's adequate drainage provided on the parking lot. The use is compatible as a retail sales use in a parking lot of an existing shopping center with nearby commercial outlets. The size, height, and type of construction of the proposed buildings and structures are appropriate. In this case, the sales area is set back sufficiently from both Belleville Road and the adjoining properties. And there's a residential property to the west, but it's hundreds of feet to the west. So, and the store separates this use from that site. This use, like the other, will take care of its own trash disposal and cleanup. It will provide its own electrical generation, and there will be no sanitary facilities on site. The hours, again, will be 10 to 10 in terms of including their wrap-up for the day. The site will bring no exterior lights. We'll bring some small lighting inside of the tent. We'll also have a 32 square foot temporary sign consistent with zoning ordinance requirements. It will have a current consumer fireworks retail facility license. The use will not significantly increase noise, odor, dust, or glare. The fire marshal has reviewed the use for fire lanes, fire protection, and security, and I'll refer to his comments as well right after I get through mine here. There are no significant off-site impacts of traffic volumes, no need for a bond given the history of reasonable and prompt cleanup of the site, and no other conditions specific to public health, safety, or general welfare that I would recommend. So as with the Lakewood site, I would recommend conditional approval with the minor condition that all documentation references Van Buren Township, Michigan as the municipality. And then going to the Fire Marshal Lenahan's a letter dated March 24th. Similarly, the Fire Marshal will do an on-site inspection prior to commencement of sales, and he's reviewed the plans and found their application is in compliance with Van Buren Township's adopted fire code as well as state regulations for fireworks sales. So I recommend conditional approval of this use as well.
Thank you so much, Director Power. Mr. Tapper, do you have anything you would like to add to this agenda item? I know it's fairly similar, but
Not really there. Again, this is our third season going to Menards. We do about 60 Menards locations throughout the Midwest. And definitely make sure when we're done, the areas are always cleaned up. We fill any holes that are, done from the tents. But actually, the tents, these two locations are frame tents, so we don't make any holes in the asphalt whatsoever. And again, we have our state licenses that are turned into Dan, so we have everything prepared right now. And the last 2 seasons, we had no problems at this location either.
all right, thank you so much, Mr. Tapper. Do you have any questions or discussion from any of the commissioners? No? Director Power, I believe I missed on the last motion if there was anybody in Zoom appearing for comments from the public.
Because the only attendee at that point was Mr. Tapper,
So,
and that remains to be the case. I see no other comments except that at first Mr. Tapper could not see our faces in the Zoom, but I've corrected that issue that he made a comment about, so we're good.
and any questions, comments from the audience? No. All right. Are we ready to take action on this agenda item?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I move to grant the applicant Phantom Fireworks temporary land use approval to permit, excuse me, it's outside. To permit a temporary outdoor fireworks tent sale at the site located at 10010 Belleville Road. This site being located in the Menards parking lot from June 22nd to July 4th, 2022, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Based on the analysis, subject to the conditions detailed in the letter from VBT Fire Marshal dated March 24th, 2022, and the letter from staff dated April 8th, 2022.
Thank you. Do we have support for the motion?
Support.
A motion by Commissioner Jar, support by Commissioner Cullen. Do you have any comments or discussion regarding the pending motion? We have no questions, comments, or discussion. Have a roll call, please.
Kelly Barr. Sherry Bud. Mindy Hutchinson.
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes.
Jeff Jar.
Yes.
Brian Kelly.
Motion for the temporary land use request for the Menards site is approved as well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Tapper. You are all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night. It brings us up to agenda item number 3 for tonight. That is the discussion regarding the Sumter Road Mixed-Use Zoning District and Sumter Road Overlay District. This is a work session that I believe, Director Power, you are going to be leading with us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to see if this works, and it might just make things a little bit smoother if I can do this from here. But I'd like to thank everybody for considering this ordinance. This is a culmination of a lot of work that was done on the Sumter Road Corridor Plan to provide a conceptual foundation for what we're doing here. And then we've also started to, I've gotten a lot of good feedback that has led into these details in the ordinance amendment that you see tonight. But before you, in front of you tonight, I have just a small worksheet that I'd like to refer to before we get into the things that I sent previously. You know, there's a lot of information in the zoning ordinance amendments that were sent, and if I can't put them up on the screen from here, I'll go ahead and reconnect over there just to have the worksheet up in front of everybody. So just one moment. About two and a half weeks ago, I sent some materials that included a full draft of the zoning ordinance amendment updates for what we'd number as section 3.121 of our zoning ordinance, which would be something called the Sumter Road Mixed Use District. Along with that, I sent some worksheets and an interactive map that you can use to kind of start to navigate and peel through the proposed language. But as you do that, I'd like to just, per the sheet I gave you tonight, ask you to consider a few big questions. You know, based on some of the feedback I've gotten so far, we're identifying some of the big picture questions that I'd like you to focus on as you look at the details of the ordinance. So the first one, you know, make sure you look at that statement of purpose for the district. Make sure you're comfortable that that still lines up with what we reviewed in the Sumter Road Corridor Plan process. And so that's going to be in section 3.121A. Formatting issues, if things aren't clear, if things are written confusingly, if they're numbered confusingly, if you have any suggestions or questions regarding these things and why they're written the way they're written, feel free to ask those. Dimension issues. So when you start getting into the dimensions for the building types that we identify, please let me know, and our team, which includes Vidya, Adam Cook of McKenna, who helped write the ordinance and the master plan, and myself, we'll start to take a fine-tooth comb to those and see if we can get to an understanding. And if there are big questions that we need you all to answer, then we'll bring them back and identify those questions. With the uses, you know, there's a big table of permitted by right and special land uses that could be in this district, applied district-wide. And those get kind of filtered into those 4 areas that we've discussed. But really, district-wide, I want you to consider if there's anything that you're truly not comfortable, anything specifically that you don't want to see anywhere in the district, let us know, and we'll let that be a discussion point. And likewise, if there's anything you think we're missing, let us know that too. We try to be pretty comprehensive, and you can't catch everything, but we try to give a good representation of a variety of residential, commercial, office, and what we consider really light industrial uses that you'd want to see in the Sumter Road Corridor District. So let us know if there's anything you think is missing or anything you think needs to be removed district-wide. And last but not least, the last point here, point 6, is really what we're going to start to dive into tonight is the area-specific uses and building types. So do these building types and uses make sense in this part of the district? So that's where what's called the regulating plan comes out, and based on which type of lot you're in, the regulating plan identifies building types and uses that that will apply. So that's kind of a segue, because I want you to think about all those kinds of questions as you look at this. If you don't have any questions or comments, that's okay too, but you get to be the chefs in the kitchen here. So please let me know and continue provide that feedback on all these points. Tonight certainly wasn't a deadline for that. We have more time. We have more work sessions before we get to a full comprehensive hearing on these changes. But those are the kinds of questions I think from the people that I've gotten feedback so far, those are the themes of the questions that are coming up. So maybe thinking about them in those terms will help you to kind of narrow down your review of this pretty large ordinance. So that being said, we can give kind of a light overview of what the whole thing is, and then I'd like to go into based on that last point, we can get into a couple of the lot types tonight and see if the way the buildings are assigned to those makes some sense. We don't have to come to a final vote tonight. It's just a discussion, so we can kind of let it go the way that it goes based on your questions. But before we do that, maybe I will jump over to the podium to just scroll through kind of the basic structure of the ordinance, and then we'll go into the worksheets for a couple of the lot types. Sound good to everybody? Okay.
Sounds good.
Just to add a little bit to what Director Powers said, when you're going through the use list for the permitted uses and the special land uses, some of the uses were excluded intentionally. We tried our best to go through each use and see whether it fits into the context of what the Sumter Road Corridor is. Our intention is not to convert it into another BROD, Belleville Road Overlay District. Their characters are dramatically different. So we want to make sure that we are keeping that distinction clear while allowing for enough number of land uses, but not making it same as the BROD, because Sumter Road Corridor has got its own distinct personality, and it's defined by its rural residential character. So we want to keep that in mind. So if you have questions about why some use is not seen there, we probably also have a list of uses that are prohibited that we have listed, but if you think something else belongs there, please do let us know.
Thank you, Vidya. All right, so if you're looking at the overall Sumter Road mixed-use district, right out of the gate, one comment that I will make is that the label of the district is the Sumter Road Mixed-Use District. So we'll make sure that label is consistent throughout, and that would be the SRMU. So that's a minor change we'll have to make here and there. But I don't want to focus on that necessarily. I want to just tell you that as with any zoning district in our zoning ordinance, there's a statement of purpose behind why part of the township is zoned a certain way. So that's no different in these more elaborate form-based districts like this one in the Belleville Road Mixed-Use District. In this case, the Sumter Road Mixed-Use District is intended to encourage contextually appropriate development and redevelopment by implementing certain recommendations, and I'm paraphrasing, by implementing certain recommendations and mixed-use policies of the 2020 Township Master Plan and Sumter Road Corridor Plan and Southside Master Plan. And those are, I'm going to summarize these: mix of compatible land uses, accommodating all modes of transportation, building location and site design, use of buildings, and the land assembly for development. Now that we have those kind of broad statements, and I encourage you to read the actual body text of those closely, we wanted to call out categories of permitted uses by right that will just go through a typical site plan review process with you as the Planning Commission, as well as special land uses that would have to go through a public hearing and a Board of Trustees review. So this is a pretty big list because, again, these are uses that will be applied piecemeal into all the different building types and filtered into the different building types based on how this whole ordinance is written. So it's not that all of these uses are permitted by right and special land use throughout the district. It's that certain selections of these uses will be permitted within certain building types, and then certain building types will be permitted within the certain areas within the district. So it's a pretty big list. Like I said, what you're going to see is it's a big list, but the recurring theme, I would say, is relatively small scale. So you're looking at a rural scale, a development pattern that doesn't lead to broad expanses of large box retail, large industrial uses, huge parking lots. This is really scaled down to be what we heard over and over again in the Sumter Road Corridor master plan as being areas where it still feels like a rural character, and you have a site development pattern that feels local and accessible to everybody. So, for example, planned shopping centers that elsewhere in the zoning ordinance are 6 acres or greater, you're not going to see those proposed in the zoning here. You're not going to see distribution centers for manufacturing proposed in this district. But within that context, there are a lot of uses that are permitted. So that's the basic premise of this table. Some of those uses are a little bit unique or might be a little bit more impactful. Certain residential uses like apartment units, bed and breakfast establishments, which are special land uses elsewhere in the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. Certain introduced uses like brew pub, certain light manufacturing, which we'll go through the details of that. But what we're talking about there is light manufacturing that's rural specific, so really light manufacturing. It's an exclusive form of light manufacturing. While these are pretty limited, they're also, they could have some impact. So these are what we'd have always be special land uses anywhere they're found in the district, that list on the right side. Whereas the things on the left side, wherever they're found, they would be permitted by right, still subject to site plan review. As you look at this, keep in mind, any of this would be triggered only by a rezoning. So the current zoning in the district today stands. To actually activate these uses, we'd have to bring in the Sumter Road mixed-use zoning district and zone the properties to that. So moving on, there are some footnotes that clarify some details of that list. We can talk about what all these mean, but they're just some caveats to the uses that you see in that table. So I'd encourage you to look at those closely as well. By one example, there's a whole category of industrial uses. We wanted to clarify that these what we're calling industrial uses are permitted in the district in certain building types. In any case, they have to be 200 feet from an existing single-family dwelling. So that's one example of something that will show up as a footnote to this table, and that will make sure that any of those industrial uses are substantially separated from existing residential. There are some additional required conditions of the district that are identified here. And so between the permitted use table with permitted and special land uses, the footnotes and the required conditions, that's really the kind of legal encyclopedia of all the uses and all the restrictions on those uses in the district. And so if you move beyond that.
Dan, if I may just add, the feedback we received from one of the commissioners was the footnotes are pretty lengthy, and typically footnotes are intended to be more brief. So we are going to work on them to try and paraphrase them, maybe create a new definition in the definition section that references rural industrial uses, have the definition over there and just reference it over here rather than have like a full paragraph as just a footnote. So we'll try to make this more concise and easier to read than it looks right now.
Very good point. Footnotes should be just that. They should be minor clarifications to something in the table. And that's one really good example where there's a whole definition listed as a footnote. That should be more appropriate as a separate definition.
And Director Howard, when you do that, will it have the ability to do the click-through? You can click on it and it'll take you right to the definition in the ordinance, or are we?
I think we have the technology for that. I don't know if we will in
Hyperlink in
the
there.
individual packets, but by the time this thing gets adopted, I don't see that
Once
being a
it's
problem.
there in the PDF version, we should be able to put a hyperlink where if you click on rural residential, it'll take you back to where it's supposed to be.
That way they're not trying to skim to page
Yes,
like 70
yes,
to.
that would be very tedious.
Yeah.
So,
Helps. It really helps.
I think we can figure that one out. So good suggestion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. When we get past kind of this comprehensive description of all the uses and all the restrictions on the uses, we're getting now into relationships with the road network, which is kind of the basis of this whole district. If you remember, a lot of how the district is laid out is based on the proximity either to the major roads like Hull and Sumter and Bemis, or to the potential future roads like the extensions of Bach Road or Rouleau Street, or the minor residential streets. And so this table that you see after that, the whole use section, this is really just to start to identify the street network and how the streets are to be designed and where they're located in the district. And some of this is based on how they currently lay out in the district. Based on those streets, you now get into the lot definitions that were identified in the plan. So you have 4 lot definitions, if you recall from the draft Sumter Road Corridor Plan. Anchor lots, which are those right at the southeast and southwest corners of Hull and Sumter Road, and the northeast and northwest corners of Bemis and Sumter Road. Landlocked lots, which we will, I think, have some further discussion on the terminology, because landlocked lots are those that currently have no frontage on Sumter Road and really are set back from any road frontage, but may have frontage on a secondary road connection in the future. So the lay of the land will remain, the lay of the uses and building types back in those lots would be the same even if there is frontage provided by a street in the future. So we may revisit that term landlocked lots, because that's really a snapshot of where those sit today. But it's really talking about those lots behind the lots that front on Sumter Road on the west side of Sumter Road. Frontage lots, deep, or the FLD, those are the generally long, narrow, generally residential and maybe existing light manufacturing uses that generally on the west side of Sumter Road. And then frontage lots, shallow, are those that are found throughout the district and have, as they say, as it says here, shallower depth. So the ones that have more of a building facade that might be closer to the street right of way tend to be more of a commercial or office land use history. All of these, and you have to skip down in the actual document, but all of these are, again, identified in what's called a regulating plan, and that's what this sheet here is. It's also something that should be familiar from the Sumter Road Corridor Plan we just went through. And then if you're interested in this kind of thing, it is something that I made accessible via a link that you can click around and see which definitions apply to which lots in the district using this map that I sent a link to. So if you click on a parcel, you'll see, yep, this is one of the ones that we identified as landlocked. This is one of the ones we identified, I'm sure, as a deep frontage lot, et cetera. So, and then you can even get in and click on these to find out more of the description behind them if you click that view button. But not to fixate on the interactive map, I'll go back to the plan. So we get into the definition of these lot types, and beyond the definition of the lot types, we'll then talk about the this dimensional requirements for the buildings that apply to those lot types. One really important point, though, is that these definitions, as they sit today, they may change in the future, and they may have a shifting boundary based on the way the parcels are divided. Maybe a deep lot today may be split, and then part of it may be reallocated to another parcel. And if that happens over time, there may be a need to reassign what we're calling deep and what we're calling shallow. So different building types may apply. Say one developer or resident acquires a lot of property. They may, over the years, change how we define these. So I want to have some language in the ordinance that speaks to, in the future, if that occurs, there's the ability to have the definitions changed through a review process. So that is included in this ordinance. Now, again, going into the details, this is where the worksheets, I think, will be helpful, because now we're getting into the real details of which building types apply on which of those lot types. And so there's a lot of detail in this table, which is currently unidentified, but it would end up being the table after this subsection E. And it's going to lay out all those building types based on, and then identify which lots they assign to in these last two columns. And basically how tall they can be, what their setbacks are. And then beyond that, there are footnotes to that table as well. But then you really get into a more visual description of what these building types look like and how they apply throughout the district. And one thing I will say is that there's also the ability for some interpretation on behalf of either the planning commission or staff to, if there's a judgment call on what building's a liner building versus a retail building, that's something that there should be some administrative review of to clarify. And that, or if it reaches that level, it could be done by the planning commission. But that being said, there's a whole section here of the building types and how they look and how you'd evaluate them throughout the district. I conclude this part of the discussion and kind of set us free on looking at the worksheet. There was, let's see, don't know if there's anything. I'll just see if there's anything else to summarize here, but really the kind of the meat and potatoes of the whole ordinance is spelled out in these sections here where you see the visual depiction of the building types. I guess the other thing I was going to say is that each of these correlate to uses that are identified in that first table you saw. So each of these building types would only logically house certain categories of uses. So you're not going to see a residential, right out of the gate, I can tell you, you're not going to see a residential use like an apartment or a single family dwelling that looks like a maker space that you see on this screen. And so you're going to see the use classifications of these different buildings also identified. When you see that, it links you back to that big table of all the permitted uses. So you can know, okay, if this use, this artisan studio perhaps has commercial and industrial, what does that mean? You'll see the commercial and industrial classifications up here in the groupings in the table in the beginning of the ordinance section. So you'll know what exactly you could be expected to see land in one of those buildings. So that is, again, a lot of information, and it might be helpful to kind of start to parse through and organize your thoughts around some of the question categories. That being said, why don't I leave up on the screen, well, why don't we break for questions at this point? But I'd like to just kind of not dive too deep, but go into the basics of a couple of these lot types and what buildings and what uses you'd expect to see in these lot types. So before we do that, any questions on the overall structure of the ordinance and how you navigate it? No?
We
Good,
are
yeah.
also going to be making modifications to other portions of the zoning ordinance that may get affected because of this. This district provides some new uses like restaurant with a walk-up window, which we do not as Commissioner Jar pointed out, we do not have a definition for something that's just a walk-up window. So right now it would fall under our carry-out definitions, but it's not the same thing. So we're going to make sure that the definition section makes up for any new type of uses we are permitting here that we don't otherwise have. And just making sure there are no unintended consequences of anything we are adopting, which ends up flipping another section of the ordinance, which we had no intention of altering at this time. So if you notice anything, so please do let us know. We do our best to try and go over it repeatedly at different times to make sure we don't have that. It is, as Dan said, really a lot to absorb. It's form-based code is great when it's well-written, and this is one of the best form-based written code ordinances. Once a developer gets the hang of it, all they'll have to do is identify, this is the type of lot I have, these are the type of uses permitted, these are the type of buildings permitted, this is what I can do. So it's very user-friendly once you get used to it. So that's it, Dan.
Thank you, Vidya.
I have a question, and I think it must not be a very good one since somebody else come up with it, but. It says under section D that drive-through and drive-in restaurants are prohibited. But then the next said, bars or standalone taverns that are not affiliated with a restaurant or a pub brew are prohibited. So if I have a tavern that's associated a restaurant that's not allowed, how can any of it be there?
That's a good question. So you've actually hit one of our big questions that has already come up. So we want to make sure that the uses are not excluding each other. And there's some restrictive language in here that may not be appropriate. So
Okay.
with respect to drive-throughs, that's a very specific, drive-through restaurants are very specific and very traffic generating and vehicle-oriented use that we've made a choice to leave out of the district. With respect to bars and taverns, that's there's more nuance to that. And really, there are some gray areas when those kinds of uses blend into what would be considered a restaurant. And so that's one restriction that we'll probably end up proposing to the Planning Commission, but proposing to you that we actually take out that restriction and don't speak to that. But with respect to the drive-throughs and drive-in restaurants, specifically drive-throughs are something that we were trying to stay away from in the district.
Restaurant is prohibited, so it wouldn't make any difference what kind of was associated with, according to what that says. But on the flip side, I mean, we know there's been restaurants in the Belleville area, part of the corridor, where Belleville has restaurants. So if someone was looking at the new corridor now and not satisfied with how some of that area has been kept up, would we want to prohibit that from moving down to the Van Buren Township section?
I think D2 will probably have to come out. Yeah, as it reads, it would probably take out most of the food service. Many of the food service restaurants these days are, I mean, if they don't even serve beer with their food or are a tavern, nobody's going there. So we would be taking out all the restaurant uses. So D2 will probably have to come out. We intentionally wanted to exclude anything that was drive-through, but I don't think the intent was to, I did not notice the second one, actually. That's a very good catch, Sherry. I don't see what would be wrong with standalone taverns. I am familiar with many in smaller lakeside communities too, and they do really good business. They are sort of the popular hangout places too. So, yeah, item D2 probably, Dan, we might take it out.
Yeah, we're already on that track. We're going to take out D2.
D3, we are going to fine-tune it simply because we receive so many requests for industrial uses. We want to be very careful. We don't allow an industrial use in the mixed-use district that technically belongs in one of our M1 or M2 districts. So we're probably going to move this into the definitions section to create a new rural industrial definition.
And I, through the chair, I know we've had someone interested in like a drive-through coffee shop or that on Sumter Road for people basically coming from Sumter wanting to hit one of those before they would head out for the expressways. So I don't know if that's something we need to look, but this would disallow that.
It was intended that we don't want anything that is automotive heavy, that counts on people stacking up on the window. Because the moment you have a drive-up or a drive-through window, the stacking provisions in our ordinance come into play. With how shallow these lots are, 8 stacking spaces, you will be well inside Sumter Road. These properties really do not have the dimensions available at this time to accommodate them unless you're looking at the deep landlocked parcels, and having a drive-through that is not on the main road where people can immediately turn and access and leave, the business is not going to be very successful. So it was intentionally excluded for that reason.
Okay.
Through the chair, could we possibly have like some sort of clause in there that would allow for stacking could not be onto the street, that the lot would have to be, the parcel would have to be deep enough to allow for stacking of vehicles? The only coffee place that I could think of would be like Bear Claw, and I've seen those in other areas. And it's a very small establishment. It doesn't take a lot of property, but the parking lots where they allow the vehicles to stack is much larger than the entire facility.
Yeah, and that's the challenge we face, because the kind of building that it supports, even if the building by itself is small for the coffee shop, the parking lot that is needed to support it is huge. In order to get those 8 stacking spaces, you're using up a lot of the parcel for impervious surface, which defeats the smaller mixed-use community we are trying to create over here. It'll once again become like north of I-90 for Service Drive. You have a small building, but you're going to have a long drive-through line. And the drive-through will have to have paved area. So you'll have, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to put in a pretty deep parking lot. I've seen some of the smaller coffee shops too, but then the parking just becomes too much for it. In order to meet the parking requirement and the stacking requirement, a good bit of the parcel will take away, which detracts from the image that we are trying to cultivate for this corridor.
Are you thinking like the one that's off North Territorial up in that area where it's on like a little dirt road and it has a one-person facility and cars kind of drive through?
I've seen that facility, but I've also seen one in Brownstown.
The one in Brownstown, and I go by that one once a month, and this little tiny thing sits way in the back, but then there's this whole 8, wide space, so cars could stack up, and I don't know if any of these lots would be that deep. And they're pretty wide because they do have parking on the side, because I think there must be a walk-up window where people can go and order, but most of them drive through, and I've never seen more than a couple cars stacked in there. But that is a big area, the one in Brownstown. I think that's a big area, and I don't think these lots are that big.
I've seen a small coffee shop. It's probably Starbucks, but it is the smallest Starbucks I've seen. It's on Telegraph Road, just north of 12 Mile, on the west side of Telegraph. It's a small building, but it's long and narrow, and the building is tiny, and then the drive-through goes all the way till the end and comes back. Literally 90% of the lot is impervious, because in order to provide stacking, in spite of all that stacking, quite often cars are out on 12 Mile creating a nuisance. So that drive-throughs always become popular, especially in winter or you're hurrying. It's easier to just order from your car. So
And I can probably see that being a problem, even just see what our Starbucks on Belleville Road and some of the other drive-throughs do. I mean, it's not so much them getting in and it's trying to get out.
yes,
It's when they try to get out.
yep.
Yeah.
Even the Tim Hortons, sometimes the drive-through is all on Belleville Road. It's a full loop around the building.
Yes, it is.
But to be fair, we're not talking about a Dunkin' Donuts or a Tim Hortons or a Starbucks, because none of those fit the form of the buildings that are listed in our ordinance, right? So this would have to be a building, a custom building that fit our form, and then the problem would be that it has too much stacking. It's not the building itself that's the problem. It's the traffic that you're saying is the
The
problem.
traffic, and while it currently does not meet any of the building forms that Starbucks or Dunkin' or Bees Coffee puts out, if they feel that there is a market for it, you'll be surprised how soon they come up with a new prototype to fit in over here and squeeze it in.
Is that like that
If they
the
think-
Bavarian McDonald's in Frankenmuth?
If they think that they have captured the market for all of the people on the south side of the township coming through them to get onto 94, they'll build a cottage Dunkin' Donuts next thing we know. They'll come up with a new prototype. They do that just when you think, no, this doesn't fit any of their styles. They'll come up with something new. So we want to avoid, if the money is there, they'll come, I'm sure.
Yeah. These are good questions. It's the same philosophy of why I think, I believe the current mixed-use district that's meant to apply in the Belleville Road corridor also prohibits new drive-throughs north of Tyler Road. I'm not sure if anybody here remembers when that was written, but it's the same idea that you're trying to make a less traffic-intensive district that's more for local accessibility between residential and commercial uses, and having that much stacking and that much traffic can cause problems, especially on a major road. The flip side of that is, yeah, there might be a market for it. And there might be ways to design it that look in consistency with the district. So I think the overall concern we've had is the intensity of the use and the traffic that it would generate, and what would that mean to the overall rural character of the area. So
Regardless of the appearance of the building.
of the appearance.
I understand.
Does the service road help avoid some of that stacking problem that you would have?
When stacking is required, it does have to be on the subject property itself. If it's a service road, it technically is a right-of-way for use of everybody. So now if you have cars stacked up in the street, you're blocking a thoroughfare for somebody else. So that would be the challenge over there. We wouldn't want a series of cars clogging up and people trying to squeeze by on the side and on the shoulder. The intent is to make this, even though it is accommodating a whole variety of uses, including lighter industrial uses, it needs to be a place where people wouldn't mind, walking past. It's not something that they just want to zip through and in and out. We want them to be able to park, maybe walk, grab a cup of coffee, walk and see an artisan shop, maybe see a bakery that's actually making its bread in its window, things like that. We hope to cultivate something like that over here.
So that seems like one of the discussion points we can come back to, but it's something to think about. You kind of have a better sense of why it was written this way. So feel free to continue to reach out to us about it. Maybe just something we can bring up at the next meeting as well.
Through the chair, Director Power, I have a question about the special land use categories. I know that there are some new ones being proposed for the Sumter Road mixed-use district, and it's occurred to me that if we add new definitions for Sumter Road mixed-use district, they won't automatically be in the Belleville Road mixed-use district. Is it safe to say that for any newly defined use class that we come up with, we'll have to review the other districts to see about applicability, or more specifically, that we haven't denied something that we didn't intend in a different district?
That's a really good question. It makes sense to do that. Some of these uses grew out of the discussion of some of the comparison communities and rural small communities where some of these uses have developed over the years. One example is like a small winery. And the context of a district like the Belleville Road mixed-use district might be a little bit different for some of those, where we may take a look at that and as a commission decided, it still maybe only works in the Sumter Road mixed-use district. That's something we will certainly look at. Like you said, this kind of, anytime we open up the zoning ordinance, it kind of opens the chain of events of just checking the whole thing and making sure we're not being exclusionary or contradicting ourselves.
Was your comment on the brew pub that brought it to my mind? If we make a use class that says a brew pub and it's okay on Sumter Road, without saying whether or not it's appropriate north, if we didn't add it to the mixed-use district on Belleville Road, it wouldn't be allowed. I don't know whether it's allowed today or not, but as soon as we define it in Sumter, it would not be defined in Belleville Road. That could be a problem. That's the specific case I was thinking of that I think opened the wider questions.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
Through the chair, Dan, what about you talk about metalworking, machine shops. I know what you're looking at is large-scale machine shops. What about if you had a guy coming in looking to do blacksmithing? That would be a metal shop. How do you define that, restrict that? That is an artisan-type product that you're looking at as well.
Sure. It might come down to, this discussion about industrial uses is another discussion that we'll have to make some corrections on, because what we've done is basically say, okay, we have a pretty big definition for what we call light manufacturing. And those light manufacturing uses are the ones that we've relegated to the M1 zoning all throughout the township. But we've said we're not going to make a new definition. We're going to kind of exclude from that definition and say some of that light manufacturing stuff is not going to be appropriate for rural character. And we've had to make some more sweeping recommendations based on that, like you're finding some nuance in it. With what we were going for with machine shops and metalworking, we really want to avoid large-scale, heavy-duty grinding, cutting, loud noises, odors. But you make a good point that within that, we need to be thinking of all the smaller applications of metal-type uses.
I think footnote 4 to the special land use sort of addresses it then, because you do say only the following light manufacturing uses are permitted subject to special approval. And under those, you have bone, canvas, cellophane, cloth, cork, feathers, felt, fiber, fiberglass, fur, glass, hair, horn. Did we have glass twice? Okay. Hair, horn, leather, paper, plastics, precious or semi-precious metals, or stone, shell, textile, tobacco, wire, wood. So this is not intending to exclude any small metalworking places. Like say somebody who does for the art fairs, they do the metal sculpting, like those beautiful things using old recyclable. That's not what it is intended to exclude. The metalworking we are talking about is something that has got industrial machinery. This is not trying to put one person with like simple basic equipment from doing this. This is from somebody who's got an automated industrial operation for punching out so many parts per this. But we need to add that clarification so somebody doesn't say, can I, can't I? So yes, I think Commissioner Jar also brought that up. Where do we draw the line? So we look at footnote 4 and D3 in order to refine what industrial uses are permitted and what are prohibited. And then we might have to create a new definition that sort of provides that clarity. We'll do a new definition that provides the clarity. So it's clear whatever is not there in that definition is therefore excluded. So.
Yeah, good comment. Commissioner Jar, if you don't mind, I might reveal a potential name for a certain use classification that I could give you credit for. Rural industrial.
I reserve the right to deny that credit.
We were thinking something along the lines of rural manufacturing or rural light industrial, because that's going to add another filter onto the light industrial or light manufacturing categories.
It's not bad. I won't deny it. I think that's a good solution to your question, and to set up a different defined class of this sort of light industry.
Cottage level, something that is basically a small operation.
Yes.
But you're looking like 2 or 3 people
Yes, exactly.
shop. I understand that.
A machine shop, yeah.
Yeah, and having to read the existing definition of light industry and then look at a footnote that excludes certain members, I found myself jumping back and forth
it is
between the
confusing.
documents without the hyperlink. And I found it very difficult to manage, but if it was in its own definition, I think it would
This was a
solve the
product
problem.
of Dan and I constantly being approached by developers who want to build stuff who we think belong in M2, but who argue with us that they belong in M1. And suddenly we are like, are you light industrial? No, we think you're heavy industrial. And then they argue, no, we are totally light industrial. We're like, okay, so that's why we are constantly jumping. At what point is the thin line between light to heavy? And now we have another line. What is light industrial versus rural light industrial? So another distinction to make.
These are great questions. Keep them coming. If you'd like to, we can pivot more toward kind of doing a sweeping overview of the building types, use types within a couple of these areas of the district, so we can kind of summarize those, if you'd like to go into that.
One more question for you, Dan. When I was looking online for the layout of where the city of Belleville existed and where Van Buren Township was, especially on the east side, I noticed that Belleville has an industrial area from the railroad tracks to the first piece that's township. Are we going to be working with the city of Belleville? What kind of industry are they looking at? If we're looking to create something that is nice and welcoming, and they throw up an industrial building, where is that going to defeat our purpose of what we're doing there?
Yeah, that's a good question that came up in one of our first, we had some coordinating meetings with some people from the city of Belleville toward the front end of our Sumter Road corridor planning process. I couldn't tell you sitting here exactly what their industrial buildings would look like, but what I've tried to do, I'll just point to one thing here. When these kinds of questions come up, I'm hoping to make it easy to find the answers, and also we can reach out to our contacts in the city of Belleville. But on this map, you can see our proposed mixed use district and our properties are the ones that are light blue. So Commissioner Cullen, you might be referring to this property here, closer to the railroad tracks. So yeah, really good point. So what we've tried to do is identify how they're zoning those sites, and I think we got this accurate. I can double check with City of Belleville, but if you click on a link, you can see how they're describing that. And this actually just goes to the overall ordinance. But just to pigeonhole into this one example, they're calling that an industrial park. So what might that look like? How might that relate? And then they have they have a pretty modern zoning ordinance that defines all these districts. So the industrial park is here. Yeah, and this is written by a company. I've seen this format of a code before, so it takes a little getting used to, but it's pretty user friendly once you do, and it'll tell you kind of what to expect from their layouts. But the long and the short of it is, it's not going to be seamless. There was an attempt to at least make our categories of uses on the east side of Sumter Road, where there is a lot of interchange between City of Belleville and the township, be those kind of shallow frontage lots that have a lot of versatility to be maybe what we call an industrial use, maybe commercial, not much residential on that side of the road. So that's one way that we're trying to mirror that there's going to be probably some industrial park and similar uses on the east side of the road. There's not going to be as much residential from our end on that side. So I'd encourage you to kind of come up with those questions and click around on here, and we can always reach out to the City of Belleville to get more information about what those lots will look like if they're developed. A lot of them are already developed, but if they get redeveloped or built up per the zoning.
Director Power? That's a great question about how the zoning adjacencies work with the city of Belleville. I didn't see, I may have missed it, but I didn't see anything that discussed the zone adjacency requirements for our new Sumter Road mixed-use zone and any of the other existing zones. Has that been addressed yet? You know what I mean? I think there's a table that says if a residential zone is to be located next to an industrial zone, the industrial zone must have increased screening. That sort of adjacency information. Do we have that yet, or is that to be done?
That's to be done. There's work that needs to be done in our landscaping article of our zoning ordinance and our greenbelt article of our zoning ordinance specific to that. So that's something, and even the Belleville Road Mixed Use District, I saw where we're going to need to provide some clarity with that district as well to make sure the district lines up with the other adjacent ones. Good question.
I think, Dan, it'll help. We've gotten a lot of good feedback about the uses, the use classification and clarification. I think it'll help if we take all the comments we have received so far clean up the ordinance, at least to show that all those have been addressed with regard to the uses and the definitions and moving stuff around, and get it back to the board so that they can move from that point forward instead of, wondering whether something got slipped. So we can do it as phase one. We fix all the comments and then we move to the next lot of comments. Might help us also get a handle on all the changes.
Yep, we'll start right away with the feedback we've gotten. And in the meantime, don't feel like you have to hold your breath and wait. You can ask other questions and give other feedback in the next couple of weeks based on what you've already read with those questions I posed earlier in the meeting. At the direction of the chair, we can use that as a break point, or if you'd like to just give an overview of the anchor lots and the shallow frontage lots, we can do that as well.
Want to do an overview real quick and move through that a little bit? We can see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I can do that. There's, I'll just point you to it's print packets, and I realize some people got print packets and some got digital ones that are a little longer, but if you look at the sheet that's a worksheet that's called, points to the anchor lots, which are the blue ones on your regulating plan, which is also up on the screen right now, in very small pictures. So what I think I'll do is I'll bring this over and I'll zoom in on the screen. If you remember, anchor lots are the ones that are right at those focal corners. So on those lots, go through kind of line by line for a couple of these, and then you'll kind of get the gist of it. But the building type, using this format of the table, one building type that we will allow in those lots is the mixed-use building type. The mixed-use building type has a 36-foot maximum height or 3-story maximum height, and its setbacks are listed here in the footnotes, but they're also laid out in the zoning ordinance. Depending on if you're adjacent to a service road, which is a interior access drive, or the actual Sumter Hull Road right-of-way, or Bemis Road, you can have anything from a 0 to a 54-foot front yard setback. 20-foot separation between buildings, or a 10-foot side yard setback, and a rear yard setback that's 25 feet or equal to the height of the building. In those mixed-use buildings, you can have basically any category of use per the permitted uses table. So that's really opening up all the uses in the district. You can also have a retail building, which has a certain look and feel, and I won't go over the setbacks and all that kind of stuff. But those retail buildings and those liner buildings are going to be more just office or commercial uses. You can have a cottage retail building that really invites all of the uses. Workshops as an accessory use, and those would be non-residential uses and non-commercial uses, but more kind of those industrial or office uses that support a commercial business up front. You could have a barn-style building, similarly supports the use in the front of the lot, and might be office, commercial, industrial, recreational, or community use, and not a residential use. You can have a artist cottage or an artisan studio, both of which are the smaller kind of auxiliary use types in the rear of the lot that are building types in the rear of the lot that would have non-residential uses. And you could have a roadside stand or what we call a studio shed. And those would really just be for commercial sales, commercial uses. And all those, again, everything in these shaded categories links back to the permitted uses table in the beginning of the ordinance. So this is probably the largest arrangement of building types and use types within the district. It has a lot of them because we want it to be a dynamic type of lot that invites a lot of different type of buildings, with some being more appropriate in the front, where you kind of make a big building that's a defined entry for the district, and some would be more appropriate in the back as an accessory building. And then you get into these frontage lots shallow, which if you go back to the map, again, these are primarily on the east side of the road, although there are some near the, well, actually not primarily on the east side of the road. There's the ones that are nearest to the intersection on both sides of the road, the intersections of Hull and Sumter. The ones that kind of relate to the shopping plaza. These, we're trying to invite building types that encourage commercial and office uses to support those kinds of landforms. So you go back to that table and you can see mixed use, retail, liner, cottage retail buildings, makers, I'm going to skip down past a few of these, maker spaces, which are kind of a blend of a accessory workshop or production area with a commercial use. And then if you're on one of these lots and you happen to be on a side street or a residential street, there's no reason to say you couldn't keep an existing home there or even build a new home-style building there. So you'll see in a lot of cases, many communities have old buildings that had been single-family homes that might remain as that form, but might take on a business use like a small office space, or they may stay homes. In this case, what we're trying to say is, if you're still fronting on, especially one of these residential streets in the Rula subdivision, there's no reason you couldn't have access onto one of those streets and keep your home as a home. But that's kind of an exception to the broader rule for this district, which is more of a commercial or office form with the buildings that you're seeing there. So this table shows you all those buildings. We also, in addition to the single-family house type of building, there's also the ability for people to have accessory dwelling units, which would be a accessory unit for people to reside in behind the principal building on those lots. And again, there's a table of the use types here that links back to all the use types in the broader ordinance here that you could expect to see in those buildings as they develop. So that's kind of a guide for how you review the worksheets are meant to be kind of a way to simplify and distill the much more elaborate ordinance. So I guess I encourage you to use whatever makes this easiest to review. But at the end of the day, feel free to keep sending us your questions. We'll take your feedback and work it into an updated entire ordinance that we'll send out, and you can provide further feedback at the next work session. With that, I'll move back up to be among you. Feel free to keep the conversation going, or we can adjourn to the next meeting on that.
Anybody have any other questions or comments? And so our process from now going forward is we're going to do the amendments, and then we'll come back in our next meeting, take a look at it again. So I know we had some, I think there was some discussion at one point about trying to set it for a public hearing, but I think that's still a little ways out, correct?
That is a ways out. You, as the Planning Commission, have two big tasks related to the Sumter Road area right now. One is the foundation for all the stuff we're going through tonight was the overall Sumter Road Corridor future land use plan, which is an amendment to the 2020 master plan. That's in the process of being presumably reviewed by our neighbors and the public out there in draft for 3 or 4 more weeks. So one thing you could do, because that's only one of these efforts, we're still very much in the middle of this second effort. So one thing you could do is to invite the public hearing for the plan to take place maybe a month from now or so, or we could wait till the next meeting if we want. But I just am trying to start thinking about setting a date for that public hearing for the adoption of the plan, because the plan ultimately is the basis for this ordinance. So we don't want to get too far ahead on the ordinance without the plan being done. So as I think the last item on the agenda tonight, if the Planning Commission wants to set a date for the public hearing for the plan, not for the zoning ordinance amendments, you're free to set that. We can get that process started.
Okay. Thank you so much. It looks really good. I guess we'll just move on to the next agenda item if everybody's okay with that. and then come back at our next meeting and take a look at it a little further.
Do we need to, pardon me,
No,
Mr. Chair,
you're-
do we need to direct staff to continue the discussion
It's a very good
at the
question.
next meeting, or?
A motion for us to direct you to continue working on this?
It doesn't need to be that formal. We got it. Yeah.
Unofficially, please continue working on it. Look
Please.
forward. All right, that brings us up to discussion on the Sumter Road Corridor Plan and discussion regarding a public hearing.
Through the chair, just one point if I could on that last topic. I'll try to highlight some areas that have been changed so that we have kind of a tracking system. And there are some areas that we're working on changing, but they may still be points of discussion you want to have kind of a final say on as a commission before we just say that they're said and done. So we'll make sure to identify what we're changing in the next round.
Sounds good, thank you. So you're proposing that we start looking at that around the May 11th date for the Sumter Road Corridor public hearing?
For the overall plan, yep. If you have a motion that recommends that, I'll go ahead and get the process started to get a notice in the paper for it and start publicizing that date as a day for the public to come in and have their final comments on the overall plan. It could be the 25th. If you want it to be 11th, I'll start doing that right now.
Okay, anybody have any feedback on a proposed date?
I have a question about the content of the plan, Mr. Chair. Is it the same draft plan that we submitted for review by the neighboring communities?
It is. We've put, it's a February of 2022 date on that plan. So it's the one that we submitted for review by the neighboring communities. There's also a sheet that's attached to it on the website that tracks some minor changes that are going to be made in the last version. So yeah, but broadly speaking, it's the same one that we recommended for release.
But it will be slightly changed with an addendum, or will the addendum be incorporated into the document? What will the public be seeing?
The public will be seeing the same plan that you recommended for release. I'm just going to keep a public record of all the recommended changes that people are recommending for the final version, so people can look at that too.
Have we gotten any feedback or anything from neighboring communities yet, or is that still a little too early to kind of look at any of that?
Neighboring communities, no. Some residents have gotten some minor feedback from, and there's minor clarifications that I think will help them understand and address some of their concerns. So you'll see those on the tracking sheet that's online right now. And based on some of the conversation we're having right now about the zoning ordinance amendments, it's actually revealing one clarification that I think should be made in the plan is those landlocked lots may have a more appropriate name. They're going to look the same and have the same building types, but they're not always going to be landlocked. So we should probably come up with a different way to define those. Anyway, there's a small tracking list of the changes, but what we're going to be asking on the public hearing date is just for the whole public to come in and share their comments on it and to go over those changes that are pending for the final adoption.
Okay, at least me personally, I'm looking at it, at how much data and everything you're moving around and going through. And if you're already identifying that we might need to do some other changes on it, I wouldn't have a problem even pushing it out farther than the May 11th date to give staff and everybody a chance to look at it a little more and get some better feedback on it. Does anybody have any feelings one way or another on it?
That sounds like a good idea.
I agree.
Yeah.
We can do that.
All right, that sounds good. So we'll try to look at later in May and probably get a lot more clarification after we look at this a little more and come back at our next meeting and go through it.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Again, everything's looking really good. I'm looking forward to seeing the packet together and how we go forward with it. So,
Mr. Chair, would we then have another opportunity at the next meeting to think about putting a motion for the date on?
I think it's a good idea, see how much we have, see what kind of feedback we have, and then if add that on the agenda item and we can address it after we go through the next review.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you so much, Director Power. All right, we are up to general discussion and updates. Any comments, questions, anything from any of the commissioners?
We'll have a meeting on May 11th. That's my only update. I know we will. We have a lot of pending development in the hopper and some things I can see being on the agenda, so just stay tuned. The new meeting time works out pretty well for people. I know it's kind of a rougher time in terms of commuting, but yeah, we'll plan to have a meeting on the 11th.
Are we having a meeting in 2 weeks?
I mentioned the 11th.
Yes.
The next meeting would be the 27th of April. Yes, thank you. Yep. So that would be the next meeting. Yeah, we'll plan. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I like the new meeting time. I like coming in with having the sun still up and hopefully getting out while it's still up. So, all right, since we don't have anything else for general discussion or comments, I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Commissioner Bud, support by Commissioner Cullen. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Daylight. I'm gonna walk out the door.
We have a half an hour yet to be.
Yeah, half hour.